One of the most overtly cliched ways that reviewers can choose to start reviews like this is to say, I really wanted to like this. Now, usually that statement will fall before a film that everyone expected to be bad, or at least something that everyone wanted to be good as a surprise. But not in this case. Here was a movie that everyone across the board thought was immediately going to be a classic, and they somehow botched it. How? When adapting the classic Batman graphic novel The Killing Joke, two things were going to be obligatory and expected. The story was never going to be long enough to make a full 90-minute feature out of, and the treatment of Barbara Gordon was always going to be something that they would try to patch up. Keep in mind that when these guys adapted The Dark Knight Returns, they kept Ronald Reagan as the president. So it's not that this wasn't unprecedented, but rather that it was understandable. I knew that changes were going to be in order. But what I did not foresee was that these changes were going to be so goddamn incompetent. It probably wasn't a good sign that the film has to start off on these awkward sets of opening lines that only serve to try and argue with the audience about whether or not this section of the film is necessary.
First of all, I realize this is probably not how you thought the story would start, but I wanted you to know that before the horror began, before it all came crashing down, there was a time when capes and cowls and fighting crime really was exciting.
You see, instead of trying to camouflage this whole section as something that was always a part of it, the creators of this project go with the be obnoxiously on the nose and totally different from the rest of the final product approach. In theory, this part is meant to serve the role of showing off that Batgirl is strong and independent from Batman, and that she has a story to tell as well. Again, I get it. Batgirl has a limited role in The Killing Joke. She's nothing more than a cameo character, yet she is the one who suffers the most damage and goes through the most in basically just 2 scenes. It's another instance of a woman being harmed just to move the story of the men along. She's crippled and arguably sexually assaulted just so Batman has something to be mad about and Gordon has something to scream about. In that regard, the writers are no better than the Joker himself, ruining a woman's life just to show off the reactions of the men around her. I mean, God forbid, introducing an iconic character just for a short cameo scene and then immediately crippling or killing them off, that's just not going to be acceptable in a 2016 Batman movie. The author who penned this opening scene claims that this section was meant to prove that Batgirl was stronger than the men around her, or something. If they had actually successfully pulled this off, it probably would have been annoying and very glaring. But I don't think they do. I don't know, maybe the guy was just making a pun. Okay, so why do people like The Killing Joke? Well, there's a large variety of reasons, obviously, but let's just focus on 2. It has a very realistic, fascinatingly vivid take on the Batman world, and it has amazing dialogue that has stood the test of time very well. There's a reason why any Joker or Batman actor will pull sections of this comic out whenever they get the obligatory con request. But this prequel section is a cartoon. Not that the problem literally is that I expect it to be a comic all of a sudden and literally switch between frozen panels, but rather that it should not be written like any other Batman story. A destructive car chase that kills half a dozen people in the middle of Gotham City doesn't fit with The Killing Joke, because the original doesn't have crap like that. While the least believable thing to happen in The Killing Joke is someone surviving a very long fall, Batgirl the movie features such stupid annoying cliches as the zoom-in enhanced street cam and the generic bad guy tech that does anything. The tone is constantly 50 paces off what it needs to be, never even for a second trying to hide in the shadows of the behemoth sitting right next to it. So people like The Killing Joke because it has great text, right? It seems like each moment is more endlessly quotable and iconic than the one that follows before. But can you say the same for the first half an hour of this movie? Can you see someone at a con pulling out a phone to read the vivid dialogue that is so elegantly crafted by the people of this film?
Babs, girl, I do not understand why you're having fishing troubles when we are in the middle of a lake.
But there's bad, and then there's worse.
Looks like a bad boy. Just your type.
Where's your overbearing boyfriend?
He's not my boyfriend.
Whoa, you might have to call the fire department.
It was fantastic. Like fireworks. It was just sex, for God's sake. It doesn't have to mean anything. It's not like we have to care. I don't care.
No one in this section is written like honest human beings. I see stories like this far too often, where the structure is built on how people act in overtly cliched media that anyone could write. Yeah, women definitely only view the relationships around them in a sort of overt, hazy, sexual glaze. Yeah, men who aren't sexually interested in women definitely have to be all distant and quiet. And of course, the villains have to be very standard and boring, but witty enough that the reader will feel like something clever is happening. There is literally an honest-to-God gay best friend in this part of the film. Someone who talks to Batgirl about the fact that she has no boyfriend and gives her romantic advice. What the actual fuck? How detached from the real world must you be to think that this is how people act and operate on a day-to-day basis? This crap is why no one reads comics anymore. Because for every Killing Joke out there, there's 15 comics written just like the first half of this movie. Undercrafted cliché machines that deny characters any kind of complexity or background for instead generic shock value and baseless actions. Okay, so no transition here. I just want you to look at the design for the main villain. Look at his face. He looks like his face is split into 3 parts. Like the left and right side of his chin are just like folds, you know? Like his face is paper mache or there's like wings. He looks like Optimus Prime from that one really crappy reboot. Every time he talks, his head moves so weirdly that I could only imagine him being played by Tommy Wiseau.
Batgirl, I am impressed. Then maybe I have a chance.
Guess what his name is? His name is Paris France. They make fun of it in the movie, so I guess I can't make fun of it, but I can be angry at it. Because, as far as I can tell from my research, they created this character. This isn't some other comic character they pulled out for this movie. They made this dude up. So, why did they give him a stupid name? Why did they think this fit the tone of the film? Why did they do this? Everything I've talked about so far would be enough to kill the first 30 minutes of The Killing Joke. But it's not the part of the film that people are going to show up expecting to hear me talk about. Because if you've been living under a rock for the past few days, or you're watching this in the future long after the people will care about this film, Batman and Batgirl do it! So I once read about this Batman Beyond comic that revealed a secret truth that Bruce Wayne and Barbara Gordon had been involved in a secret relationship, which ended with her being pregnant with his baby before losing that baby in a fight. This had been a controversy back in the day, but I figured that it didn't matter that much because we could all choose to ignore the comics, and because I figured they wouldn't make the same mistake again. They wouldn't, for instance, try to attach this stupid idea to a classic that everyone loves just to make it so we can never forget about it. But I was wrong, apparently. Do I even need to explain why this is stupid? Batgirl is so often portrayed to be the same age as Robin. Both of them look up to Batman as a father figure. Even within the loose and detached continuity of this film, Batman has to be close to 20 years older than Barbara. Even one of the producers in this film referred to this aspect in defending the storyline. It was really important to show that both of the characters make some pretty big mistakes. I mean, his parental skills aren't that great. Maybe never having any kids of his own, he doesn't realize that if you tell a kid not to do something, they're gonna want to do it even more. Yeah, I definitely see where you're coming from with that argument, but there's one other thing that you're definitely not supposed to do with your kid. You're not supposed to have sex with them. Now, I can kinda see why you might be confused on this one, because that's not exactly the sort of thing they mention in those parental guidebooks. But it's usually because if you gotta ask, if the question just crosses your mind, you're probably not cut out for this line of work. This movie is trying to make up for the sexist underwriting of Barbara Gordon in the original by adding more scenes where she has sex. They literally add another almost rape scene, where the villain drugs her and she barely gets away before he starts assaulting her. Why did they think that this would make things better? Why did they think that this would make people less mad? Why? Why? The problem is not removed if you duplicate it over and over again. Instead, it takes a single moment done for shock value, make it seem like something the film is dedicated to doing as a theme over and over again. Like Batgirl is the leading star of a shitty Mexican soap opera. They took the mild sexism of the original, and they supplemented it with modern comic book sexism. Moreover, the two of them doing it isn't some brief sidestep for a few scenes for fan service. It becomes essentially the entire narrative. Batman won't talk to her because it's too awkward. He doesn't answer her calls. That's a real thing that happens. They have multiple scenes dedicated to that fact. And Batgirl decides to quit. Yeah, Barbara stops being Batgirl because it's too awkward. Yeah, no, seriously. This happens. It's just too awkward for Batman, so they both agree it's time to quit. How does this prove that she is strong and independent? If Batman being a little bit awkward, if the man in her life not liking what happened, means that she has to quit, means that it's game over, how does that make her strong and independent? Someone please explain this to me, because I do not understand. I think they felt like she needed to stop being Batgirl because she was never Batgirl in the comic. I don't see why that needs to mean she quit. Why wasn't that just her day off? Do you know what this makes it seem like? There was a character in EastEnders who left the show, right? And they didn't kill her off. She just left the show. You know, happy, moved to some island in Puerto Rico or something. And then a couple Christmas specials later, they had it mentioned that she died in a car crash, just as a cheap, easy, sad Christmas special. Because the character has no narrative purpose anymore, yeah, just kill her off for shock value, it doesn't matter. That's what this makes it seem like. Because, ignoring the fact that it's sad that a woman got injured, she's not going to quit being Batgirl. So what's there to be sad about? That she's not going to jog anymore? It now makes it seem like the story is that because she stopped being Batgirl, the writers were like, fuck it, cripple her, put her in the hospital, who cares, because she's not Batgirl. That's what it feels like now. Okay, so, you're going to be shocked to hear this. But this isn't the moment that annoys me the most in this special. No, that moment is somewhere in the middle of the first 30 minutes. Barbara comes out of a cafe and sees two couples arguing. The guy yells out,
I need space!
And Barbara responds by flipping him across the pavement, having him land in some bushes, and quipping out,
There. Space.
Are you serious? This moment alone would have knocked The Killing Joke down an entire star. In just 10 seconds, this film accomplishes the opposite of what it's supposed to do. Instead of making me care more about Barbara, it makes me care less. Because Barbara is clearly a piece of shit. The first half of The Killing Joke is a 1 out of 10. The second half of The Killing Joke is a 9 out of 10. If you haven't seen this movie somehow, and you still decide to watch this review, go buy it. Because the second half is that good. That even if the first half is just eyeball-bleedingly bad, the second half is still a masterpiece. Just buy the DVD, skip forwards until you see Batman meeting with two cops, and then watch it from there. I'm Quentin Kyle Hoover, and that's all you need.